एक मिनट रुक जाओ, रेडी होने दो। चलो ये कर लेते हैं। दिस कुड बी अ ग्रेट इंट्रो।
Hi, I'm Akshay.
Hi, this is Saurabh, and you are listening to the Founder Thesis podcast. We meet some of the most celebrated startup founders in the country.
And we want to learn how to build a unicorn.
Hi, I'm Rahul Garg. I'm founder and CEO for Moglix. We are India's largest and fastest growing B2B commerce company.
Many of you would have heard of the so-called PayPal mafia, which includes famous people like Elon Musk, Reid Hoffman, and others who were a part of PayPal and went on to build their own blockbuster startups. Lesser known is the Google mafia, which includes people like Sheryl Sandberg of Facebook, Kevin Systrom of Instagram, and our guest today, Rahul Garg, the founder of Moglix. Moglix was born out of a deep insight that Rahul got while working at Google that the world will shift from discovery platforms like Google to transaction platforms like Amazon. And he took a bet on this idea, quit Google, and built a B2B transaction platform, Moglix, that is today among the top platforms used by manufacturing businesses for their procurements. Listen to this insightful conversation between Akshay Dutt and Rahul Garg on building and scaling a B2B platform sustainably.
What was your ambition when you were in IIT? Like, did you want to follow the typical route of IIT and then going abroad, or like IIT, IIM, or like what was the plan?
So I think it is interesting because pretty much my plan, I had not thought of a plan. What do I do next? I mean, I was like, I want to be an engineer and I want to be the best engineer. And now I am at IIT and I got to sort of learn what I can learn, but and go about it and see how it comes. So I wasn't like, if someone was to ask me a question, what will you do 10 years, 20 years out? I would be like, yeah, I'm becoming an engineer. I'll build some products and technology. That's what I knew. And yes, I think somewhat growing up, I think there was also the strong feel that I want to do it from India. So I think uh, that we can build some of the best technology from India and want to create that brand out of India. So I think that's how my IIT entire 4 years was about learning, sort of fooling around a little bit, but but it was pretty exciting 4 years that we spent there.
Hmm, hmm. And you eventually joined Ithium. And I think so. You had like about a 8 year stint total. Most of it was in this only, like in wireless technology. Like after that, you joined Freescale and then Connexent.
Yes, so most of it was wireless and wireline technology. So I worked on 4G cell phone chipsets. Freescale was kind of the Motorola. In fact, again, many of the technologies are still coming into the market. What I worked on, Connexent was into the DSL, so all the broadband routers you see at home. I mean, I think back in the days, 70% of the broadband DSL routers were powered by Connexent chipsets. So imagine in your house, whether it is the DSL line bringing the broadband to your home, or whether you are watching a satellite receiver, or whether you are looking at wireless LAN. All of those technologies I had a opportunity to dabble with, and really no. Sometimes what we take or assume as pervasive, there's so much of engineering which goes behind making some of these products successful, and and the impact it has on consumer and businesses. So I think there was so at 30 I was like having filed 16 patents, many of them sort of were still in process. Most of them got approved in the last few years. Uh, had worked on pretty much all forms of wireless communication that touch daily lives in phenomenal companies. Because and and I felt that I had reached a reasonable amount of, I would say, heights in terms of what one could achieve in India as a designer in the wireless communication. Um, and multiple opportunities in between of relocating to US and companies sort of coming to me, both US and Japan, and that sort of love of engineering, and I would say somewhere that very strong connect to the country that I want to do it from India remained uh, remained with me, which continued to make me stay in India.
Okay. So why did you decide to like take a year off and do an MBA?
So it was interesting. So in the 8 years of my journey, I had one failed attempt at doing a startup, and I think if you look back, I think 2006, 2007. I mean, very early days of startup ecosystem, right? So not I don't think there were a term like angel investors or mentors or so on and so forth, and probably today it has become a uh, one. It is there are a lot of them available, and many of them actually being decent, who are able to guide you if you are a 25, 26 year old trying to do a startup. And I think one of the reasons I felt it we could not take
What was
off.
this startup about that you tried?
It was still in the area of wireless communication only. Very early days of looking at how we can apply some of those into defense technology, and we felt there were the where the consumer world had gone to versus where defense was. I think we felt there were a lot of applications that we could be working on. And I think one of the reasons I felt we couldn't sort of get to do it properly, one, obviously ecosystem was where it was, but second thing, I think we didn't understand this black box of what does a sales and marketing mean. And for me, I felt I understood the innovation side, building products, but I said like I want to figure out what is this chidiya, so to say, of sales and marketing, because it seems like that is like super difficult, and we have to, if I have to become an entrepreneur, this is something I will have to learn now, and seems like MBA is a way to learn this. So
Okay. So you had like a pretty long stint of 5 years at Google. So when you were reaching the end of the stint, did you like start thinking of Moglix, the idea, and uh, working on it, or did you decide that I want to be an entrepreneur and quit Google and then think of the idea?
so interestingly, I mean, since I mean, again, the entrepreneurship kida does not go away. If you want to be an entrepreneur, and if that's what you sort of aspire towards, I think you'll do that attempts at it. In fact, one of my attempts was also at ISB to try and become an entrepreneur. I mean, that time I was pretty passionate about analytics. I was trying to do something in marketing analytics, because marketing is something that I was trying to learn, and analytics and data was something I really sort of enjoyed dabbling with. Uh, so multiple, I think, attempts, but I think in my fifth year at Google, I decided that.
So these attempts did not work out because they were on the side. Do you think that's the reason,
So
or
yes, they were not full time because I had not quit. I mean, at ISB, technically, they're not on the side, but for whatever reasons, they did not sort of pan out into a full time gig and then playing it out. So I think when I had decided in the Google journey that I'm going to go and do this, I said like I'm going to quit first. So I actually quit and put in my papers that I'm going to go back to Delhi and I'm going to start a venture. I mean, there were three, four things that I was excited about as a space. I typically look at space. I don't look at a specific idea, because I think uh, ideas you can sort of sometimes they become irrelevant, and sometimes you have to pivot out and things like that. So you have to be really committing to a space, and then find the best opportunities within the space. So I think for me, B2B, among the top three that I had selected at that point in time, over the next 2 to 3 months, it became the space that I want to go for.
so
Um,
why did you finalize that? Like, what were the indicators which made you bullish on it?
No, so I think there were, I mean, few factors which kind of see when you're committing to a space, you're looking at 10-year horizons. I mean, for me at least, that was how I was thinking about it. And you're like, you can't be opportunistic about it, and you can't be sort of playing to the wave that it's something that is the flavor of the season, and therefore I'm going to play to it and kind of a thing. So I think I was always looking at it a little bit far ahead. I think I also come from a school of thought that basically I'm more inspired or excited about large problems which are difficult to solve, because I don't think of the world as too many large problems which are easy to solve, uh, or probably there are too many people who can do it. So I think large problems which are slightly more difficult to solve is something that excites me, because I think uh, that's what I've been trained to do. I mean, like the first 8 years of my career, I was solving, and in many of those instances, I mean, we worked around to create the best algorithms, creating our own patents, and sort of making sure that we are able to create world class systems to the 99.9% accuracy levels, right? So I felt it was important to pick a space which is large. I had brief exposures to Alibaba, working on the China strategy. uh, at Google, we made some attempts also of sort of trying to beat Alibaba, and I think there is one of the failed experiments, probably a smaller failed experiment at Google. I think there are many large failed attempts at Google. One of that was Google launched Google for Business in 2013, I guess. And
So this was like a marketplace where businesses could list.
Yes, it was a marketplaces where in the Google DNA it wasn't a fulfillment platform. It was like the search and classifieds platform where people could go and search instead of going to Alibaba. I mean, that
Like
almost
India Mart
like India
kind.
Mart. I would say
Hmm.
India Mart is more content. I would say India Mart creates unique content for itself. Does it? I mean, Google in its own platform approach was trying to do it far more light touch than what India Mart would look like, or than what Alibaba would look like, right? And one of those sort of half-hearted attempts. So I think, for me, the space was pretty large. I think I felt also that my own view of the world was that everything in the world will move away from discovery to transaction platforms, and that is bound to happen for B2B. What has happened for B2C? And I think that macro sort of very strong belief that I want to sort of champion, figure it out, do it, and it's not an easy problem. So I think that made me gravitate. I mean, some amount of sort of the love for manufacturing helped in that sense, because yeah, you kind of love to walk into manufacturing plants and talk to people and things like that. And if those are the industries you are impacting, that's something you really like to work upon. Because the other thing which is important for me, I think creating an enterprise is about creating the size of impact. And I think I felt, given it's the largest sector in the country, I mean, even a 10% impact on the sector can be phenomenal for the country. And those are things that excite me. And I think, and that sort of, yeah, and things then happen. We started in a manufacturing plant. I mean, like a very small manufacturing plant. We started in a manufacturing plant.
So, like in 2015, beginning of 2015, you quit Google and you came back to India. Like, did you immediately finalize on it, or like and did the funding happen before you actually started implementing, or did you first implement and then go out and look for funding? Like, tell me from the timeline, like how it progressed once you quit.
So it's very interesting. So I think, for whatever reason, I think God has been kind, and some of the people that I worked with have been extremely generous. So I actually put in my papers in July of 2014. And my boss told me, like, there is only one rule for me accepting your resignation. One, you cannot join any other company. you your only option why you are being allowed to resign and move out is that you are going to start on your own.
Okay,
And
okay.
the second condition was, I don't care about the time because anyways I'll take a year to hire a replacement, which actually he took a year to hire my replacement. He said like, you know all the tricks, you know how to get things done, you keep working at it, and uh, whenever you want to sort of call it the day, I think that's fine. So and since I
So
was
he gave you a free hand that you start working on your idea, but don't quit until you are like
He
ready
said like,
to.
this is something that I am keeping, and you just like figure out, and we'll figure out when you want to sort of leave. So uh, yeah, I made all the, I think, the 6 months. So actually, technically, I quit on December 31st, 2014. So I think I had that luxury of a 6 month period where I could spend like my Saturdays and Sundays and some amount of evenings, kind of figuring out, building on which is the space I want to select and shortlist, talk to
And you
people.
were in Singapore at that time,
I
like.
was in
Uh,
between Singapore and India. I moved to India in end October. Uh, but
so is that why Moglix is registered in Singapore?
Yes, that is one of the reasons. I think not the only reason. I mean, the get go, the ambition has been to build a global company, and I felt Singapore was a fantastic hub to kind of create the holdco, to build a global company. So yeah, the company was registered in Jan of 2015, and since I was working on this idea, I mean, I knew a few people within the venture ecosystem. If you spend 15 years probably and working pretty much at the heart of technology and innovation. Uh, so every startup in tech space would be my partner, for example. Um, and when I quit, I mean, it was like a very obvious thing that are you pursuing anything in advertising tech, martech, whatever the alphabets look like? And if yes, please take potentially money from us because the level of knowledge insight that you may have about the industry or where it is going. Anyways, some of us are coming to you for advice, which company I should write a check. So, uh, but in that pursuit, anyways, for me, the decision of what do you pursue is not based on the past because it's based on what do you think for the future, what makes sense. So I ended up pursuing this. I think. Again, somewhat lucky. I think I did found early investors, and by March I think we found investors who were willing to take a punt on the space and what that I was pursuing it. So we were able to raise the first kind of check. But I also found that pretty much every single sort of leader that I have worked with or worked for, I think, was so generous and supportive of the fact that I'm pursuing. So my Google boss, I mean, like many of those guys ended up putting check as well. But we raised the first round as an institutional round, with few of the angels. We never went through the classical pure
Friends and family. Huh?
angel family kind of thing. Hmm.
Okay. So March, when you got the funding, what was uh, the? I mean, by that time, what was the implementation like of the idea of Moglix?
I mean, it was three people, and we had a PPT. I mean, that, that was pretty much it. And there is the 15 years of working hard and building stuff behind us.
Uh, uh,
Uh,
so who were the other two?
so early leadership team I built out. I started to hire, I think, probably from March, and building some of the early team members. So 2015, I ended up bringing six more people as part of the leadership team, combined sort of business leadership, technology, so on and so forth.
Hmm. Hmm. So how did you go about prioritizing that what to build? And like, did you, for example, say, okay, let's get supply in first, or let's build a good online marketplace first, or like tell me about that product evolution.
See, when we are so early in the market and uh, figuring out what is the right way to build, I think there is no templates of building it out. And I think for me that works well when there are no templates, uh, because we have to think on first principles. And if you are creating marketplaces of products to sell, I think you do need to create basic supply before you can go out to the buyers and start to sell. So I think you have to build some of these things in tandem, but which means we were building software, we were building um, some of our supply catalog, many of these elements. And as we continue to build that out, we launched our first alpha in like July of 15, which was like literally maybe 3,000 SKUs, uh, and just like a bare minimum website which could actually take some orders.
And how did you get these SKUs? Like, was it an inventory led model or a marketplace model?
No, it was marketplace at that point. So we were sort of not taking inventory. We had built a supply ecosystem of industrials, and we had just started to sort of understand how the suppliers are looking at selling their products. We have started to talk to the buyers and customers, understanding uh, how do they buy, what do they look for in that process of buying, understanding what will make sense for many of them to come online, or what will be some of the hurdles for those guys would face while they start to look at the products being bought online, or how have they done over the last 30, 40 years, so on and so forth.
Hmm, hmm, hmm. And what categories did you choose?
There was no sort of like a real answer for it. So we just went on building 10 categories. So it was just more broad based, looking at various electricals and tools, and we built up fasteners, things like that. And I would say we were still, we knew how to analyze many of the search data and other tricks of the online. So we were doing that continuous research of understanding what are the consumers looking for and what are the businesses looking for, and continuing to build products into the catalog based on some of those, I would say, imperfect science uh, that we could build out.
And like, were you also handling transport? Like when you launched as
Yeah,
a
yeah, yeah,
marketplace,
yeah.
was
So
it?
we
Okay.
took the responsibility of the entire delivery, right? So we were partnering. We didn't had a large fleet per se at that point in time, early on, but we said like it is our responsibility to deliver the end product. So we have to stitch the entire thing together uh, as a customer delivery experience. And these many of the products that we were selling, like probably nobody had ever bought them online before. So it was like unique experiences that these products could be possibly available online, right? So because there were no precedents, I remember us shipping like a 50 kg machine to somebody in Jammu and Kashmir, and it was like, why the hell this guy bought online this product? We were just experimenting and cataloging this product, not even sure whether somebody will actually buy it, and the guy just bought it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There was like a latent demand for it, which you were able to tap.
Yeah, absolutely. See, India Mart was there, so I think there were definitely some people searching for these products online and trying to connect to the suppliers. We just didn't know how many of them will actually start transacting, because that demand of these products was always there, right? The question was how much of it is offline to online, and whatever the online demand is there, is that really about discovery of suppliers, or are they ready to start transacting on the platform?
Hmm, hmm. So, what was the first year like? Like, 1st April 2015 till 31st March 2016. Like, what kind of top line did you do in that year, and what were the things that worked for you?
I think we were very, very small because technically, I mean, like our software product was still so early. So I don't think we really looked at the revenue number. It was like probably a couple of crores we did in that year. And our next product launch was like March, April of 16. I mean, we continued to learn, experiment, build some of the early customers.
And how did you build trust? Like, transaction needs trust. So, how did you like build that trust and get customers to actually give you money upfront? I assume it would be upfront, right?
Um, I mean, we offered all kinds of means of like the prepaid and cash on delivery and some of those things. Uh, so we had to do that because I think people would not absolutely give you entire money prepaid, and that's a problem still in India, right? Because in India is a little bit trust deficit economy, um, and I would also think there are obviously uh, certain percentage of customers who are also experimenting still. You don't even know whether that's a true demand or are they just experimenting, or uh, and that's a problem broadly in it because it's been created by the B2C ecosystem of the return behavior and various things. Uh, that is still, I think, going to take another 3 to 5 years for India to mature as a country. Uh, that people move away from experimenting to actually taking online as the most credible platform for buying products.
But in that early period, like, how did you get customers? Was it like Google AdWords, and if someone searches for fasteners and Moglix comes there, was that the approach, or were you like uh, had a like a offline sales team approach, or
We early on we were doing a lot of the online hacks as well, uh, because we wanted to understand the customer behavior online. As we started to talk to the large manufacturing houses, we realized that we would need some kind of enterprise sales organization. So we started to build in 2016 our enterprise sales organization, and which was like pretty much one guy and me. That was our enterprise sales organization, and we would go and start to talk to the manufacturing companies and understand how they will transform their buying to go from kind of whatever offline approach of SMS, WhatsApp, email, phone that they're doing towards online based behavior. And I think 2016 that way was a very interesting year because we realized that we will have to go with a combination of capturing some of the demand that happens online using an online platform, which you see today also on Moglix.com. But we will have to go out and build a sales force which will work with large companies because they're really looking for people who can understand their requirements a little bit better and kind of teach and educate them so that they can move or transition from offline to online journey. So I think we realized that, and I think over a period of 2016 2017 this became a dominant channel because large companies with their own processes of SAP and other systems, I mean, they would struggle with how do they start to buy online directly. So we would work with them very closely on make sure we are able to make that transition easier for them.
you would integrate into their ERPs so that the procurement is like single click procurement for them?
Yeah, we would do multiple things. I mean, all people. India is one of those heterogeneous market that there is people have different processes, different ERP systems, different behaviors, different configurations of their own manufacturing plants, different configurations of how their procurement organization is, so on and so forth. So we would have created 5 to 10 different unique ways of how organization will get transformed into the next generation kind of procurement and technology-led procurement organization. And I think this is still work in progress. I mean, all of us combined together are less than 1%, I think, of the overall market. So I think it's only next 5 years or 10 years is when India will, probably in 5 years, India should get there of really a technology first country. Uh, where, because we see India has a very unique behavior that there are very few early adopters typically in a country, and once you cross that early adopter curve, everyone just wants to use it, right? So, and then the power of population and all of those kind of kicks in, um, because the first, I mean, in consumer company, probably first million customers are difficult, but then suddenly you have 100 million, and that's true in B2B as well. That you have to really sort of work with the first 100 customers, tell them why this makes sense, how they should think about it, how they should go about it, and then the next 10,000 people just want to sort of come on it and are okay to learn from you versus sort of have too much of their own age old biases.
Hmm, hmm, hmm. Okay. So you said in 16 you launched your second product. What was that?
So we call it as an enterprise. Uh, we call it large enterprise buyers terminal. So it's a SaaS platform which enables the large enterprises who wants to work with Moglix to go about deeply sort of working and enabling them uh, of on both their business process as well as the commerce engine that we support as a company.
Okay. Okay. And how did GST affect your business plans, your business model, and like what was the impact of that?
Uh, GST was, I think, very interesting because, firstly, pre GST, I think um dealing with large enterprises, we had to do excise, VAT, and all of that was happening by state, and it was just a nightmare to kind of do it in that manner because for every state you have to kind of go and knock on the state doors, and they each one of them will have different policies of what needs to be done and things like that. And I think it was like a shit show of what India was pre GST. And I think GST completely transformed both. I think our ability to build national B2B supply chains. Second, our ability to kind of scale rapidly. So I think we took our first 100 CR run rate. We took almost like what 2 years plus to get there, and the next one happened in 6 months. So you could suddenly feel that the amount of game change that was being introduced by GST was phenomenal. And I think it was one of those sort of inflection points for a value that you're building, but then there are sort of this unlock that has to happen for you to be able to scale as an organization.
Okay. So tell me about getting funded by Ratan Tata. How did that come about?
I think it's a very interesting thing because when I started, and I think I didn't speak about this much, but I mean, all my previous failed attempts at startup were with co-founders. And one of those reasons that I attributed mentally was ki many of them got cold feet, and when we were supposed to exit together, they didn't sort of do that, and sort of they didn't. So when I started Moglix, I was very clear that I want to just do it based on what I want to pursue, and I want to go on my path of pursuit rather than dependent on others. And I think hoping and believing that if I do good work, then other people will come out and support. And I think that's how our journey has been. That we have found sort of help support from directions. Pretty much everyone I have known my entire professional and careers, and people I've known, everyone has been out there supporting us in whatever forms of the connection. So we got fortunately connected and got an opportunity to present to him for 45 minutes, and I just latched onto it. And we presented for 45 minutes. I think that is one of those best experiences. This happened late of 2015, so I think and
What do you remember about that experience? What was he like?
so I think the key thing that I remember is that obviously in my sort of professional life, I mean, the people that I've always looked up to kind of fall under two, three buckets. I mean, firstly, I mean, early days of my life, I think I pretty much look up to all innovators in the world. I mean, that is always like whether it is what Bill Gates has done, Steve Jobs has done, anybody who's loved for science, technology, and has done phenomenal. I think those are the people I would admire the most. Edison for building stuff and so that kind of thing. But then I think over a period of time, I've built a growing appreciation for people who have made large impact, and R&T was like one of those figures for me. R&T and Nandan continues to remain those figures for me of people who've gone and done it. And I think meeting him was like a uh, very interesting because you kind of are getting the goosebumps, but you also meet a person who is like extremely humble and sort of listening to you. He's not like the typical savvy uh, Google CXOs who will have alpha energy of interrupting you or sort of overpowering the conversation, any of that stuff, right? He's patiently listening to what you're trying to do, is kind of trying to nudge and in his own curiosity, why are you doing this, or how you are thinking about this element versus the others. Uh, and he's as curious as you are. I mean, like, as an entrepreneur in early days, you are curious about learning about the stuff, and he's curious about learning that from you. So I think creates a very interesting, and you never feel, or at least he makes all of his attempts, or probably the way he is as a person, that he will not make you uncomfortable in any shape or form. Or and I think that was a very, very interesting experience. And I was like, literally, we were dying that will he invest? I mean, and we said, like, it doesn't matter if he invests, but does he really believe in what we are doing? And I think, yeah, I mean, I think we got the confirmation in maybe a day or two that is willing to sort of support a small check. And I think that was like we were on top of the world. I mean, his my picture with him continues to sort of remain one of those fantastic memories. I mean, we met him twice after that, but yeah, that first one is always leaves an impression. And uh,
So why do you think he invested? Like, was it he was bullish about the sector, or did you impress him as a person, or what do you think?
I see at his stature, and he's a man of few words, I think. So you'll never, for many of these figures, I mean, you can't really sort of, you can create hypothetical beliefs of what they are thinking, but I think it's unfair to say that what exactly made him invest. I think the only two things, that his love for technology, his love for manufacturing, and were definitely something that I feel. So we felt like, I mean, we were ticking all the box anyways. That if there is one startup he should invest, it should be us, because we were having the two things he loved the most. And there were not that many people who had both technology and manufacturing in the single sentence. And even now, I think with the way we go about and doing stuff. So yeah.
So can you help our listeners to understand the landscape of B2B e-commerce startups? So like there is India Mart and there is Udan, and uh, at one point of time there were these companies like Industry Buying. I don't know if they're still prominent players or not. So like where is Moglix in this broad landscape? And can you just like paint a picture of that?
See, I think there are two dimensions to the B2B e-commerce landscape. I mean, one dimension is, are you a discovery platform or are you a transaction platform? And I think India Mart clearly falls under the bucket of discovery platforms, which is like Google is a discovery platform, India Mart is a discovery platform, Alibaba is a discovery platform. So I think that's the first thing. I've always believed that I want to build a transaction platform. So I think firstly, I'm in that bucket. Second, I think when you start to build transaction platforms for B2B, there are multiple verticals. I mean, you could be doing manufacturing like what we do. We do manufacturing infrastructure and become one-stop solution for those. You could be doing for FMCG, you could be doing for electronics, so on and so forth. So, and that's where the multiple companies emerge, or one of the companies which I know, the the founder is a good friend. He does it for sort of fruits and vegetables, right? So I would say that it is pretty much about what is the customer and the supply segment you want to go after in a transaction oriented system. And that's where we have focused very closely on manufacturing and infrastructure, and many of the peer set has focused on other verticals. And then there are few which has focused, I mean, the names like industry buying and others that you mentioned, they have kind of positioned themselves to work in similar sectors for us, but far smaller in size and comparison. So, and anyways, all of us are still kind of changing the behavior from offline to online. So uh, the real competition still lies there, not with any of these peer sets in our mind.
Hmm. Hmm, 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 hmm. Okay, okay. So, just to like give an idea of how the unit economics, or what is the business model of B2B e-commerce, like, like what is the kind of margin that you make, what is like uh, uh, compared to B2C, like what is the returns that happen and stuff like that, like, could you like illustrate that a bit?
So, I mean, some of those data points are pretty confidential, but I think
Hmm.
what I am able to speak
Like
to.
broad industry level, if you want to share, or just so that people understand how is it different from B2C e-commerce, and or even how is it different from offline, people who do this offline.
So, I think one, obviously, if you are a transaction oriented platforms, you will be primarily monetizing based on transaction fees, uh, whatever that looks like. I would say there are a couple of differences in B2B versus B2C. One, it is typically not an impulse buy. So it can be still single decision maker, multi decision maker. So there is a process, method to madness. There are elements under which a business can buy versus what a consumer buys and is accountable towards. And Therefore, I would also think that it is not a market where you can drive more demand based on pricing alone as a lever. I mean, I'm not going to buy for my factory more fasteners because they are cheaper, right? But I could buy maybe more clothes because they are cheaper, right? So maybe more shoes if they are cheaper, right? So um, uh,
So discounting doesn't win you customers, basically.
it doesn't win the consumption. It can win the customer, but it doesn't win the consumption. So if yeah, I mean, discounting, see, everywhere free food is good. So if you go and say that I'm going to give everything cheaper, probably more customers for the same requirement they had might shift from offline to buying from your platform. So that behavior you can never sort of because that just makes logical sense. But whether that will drive consumption, the answer is no. And I've actually always wondered. I mean, for many of the consumer startups, I think maybe somewhat it's a ecosystem disservice by VCs to make them fight on trying to drive the demand consumption at a pace higher than what a market can support. And I always use this example that I am never used to going to a restaurant and asking for discounts Or even if I am like, let's say, some club member or some card gives me 5% discount, and you never walk into a restaurant and ask for discount. So why should an online behavior really be about trying to artificially sort of induce that change that you sit at home and instead of cooking, I want you to get cheaper food, which is not something the restaurant is able to offer, but I'm going to sort of like artificially induce the demand. I feel those. I mean, yeah, it shortens your life cycle of building a company. But are you building a company for 3 years or are you building the company for 20 years? I think it just completely changes the dynamics of how you think about company building. And those are things you can't take away. Once you are on that kind of a race, then you can't get away from it. So,
That's like a race to the bottom.
yeah, it's a race to the bottom. It's clear. I mean, it's okay. Let me put it, it's a race to a monopoly. So many of the Western models work on this principle of race to monopoly by discounting and market share and then basically jack up the prices. I mean, Amazon basically drove many of its competitors out, including diapers.com and few other companies, purely by discounting and creating a monopoly and then jacking up prices. Now, India, I think fundamentally we hate monopolies. I mean, while we are I mean, US is more capitalist than democracy, probably. India is more democracy than capitalist. I mean, we hate typically people who are pure capitalists, right? Um, uh, so I think we will struggle as a market if it was a one-player game as a consumers, and we have so much entrepreneur blood in the country that if there was one player left, then there will be somebody second who will come. So I think. Uh, in that spirit, I would say that this race to the bottom, and when you have quite a lot of capital as it is available today for the entrepreneurship in the country, there's going to be a long haul. And I think that typical venture models of uh, discounting, building, getting the market ahead of itself. I mean, we have to get the GDP per capita up in the country. That will automatically mean there will be more demand. And it will take us 5 years to get there to build a 5 trillion economy. When this consumption patterns will become very different, when we can build independently profitable companies like what China is able to do or US is able to do. Now you can burn all your money in 2 years and then sort of still wonder whether the company is going to sustain itself or just make sure that you have a more sustained. I'm not saying that you don't have to burn capital, but you more sustained way of building a company over a 5 year horizon because of just where we are as GDP per capita and our ability to afford and various other things.
So, but like, in B2B e-commerce, do you see the same kind of return ratio? And do you also offer credit on your own? Like, how are those things different?
So firstly, I mean, the return rates are typically smaller because, as I said, it's a bit more serious kind of thought process on buying and things like that. I mean, and we put more processes and check also because our supply ecosystem will also not be geared up for high returns. And we have to remember that the offline world, both in B2C and in B2B, is not used to returns, right? Even offline, I mean, you go to many of the malls, still, I mean, they struggle with doing returns in offline world in a consumer setup. So I think you have to emulate far closer to what a offline world looks like and the principles still bringing customer convenience. So yeah, so there's much better in terms of some of those elements, and you have to build the processes and systems around it. Otherwise, you can't succeed uh,
Mm, mm, mm.
as a company.
And
And sorry, go ahead.
like, what about the pricing in terms of like financing, like payment options?
Yeah, so we have to sort of respect the fact that many of the online customers are being trained to offer all the payment gateways and wallets and cash on delivery kind of ecosystem. But many of the large enterprises are more used to payment terms, which can be 30-day credit or 60-day credit kind of payment terms. So, depending on the customer segment and the channel that you're addressing, you will evolve your payment mechanisms in that manner.
So you are a marketplace, right? So if a customer is paying after 30 days, then you have like a similar arrangement with the supplier for it, or like how does that work?
Yeah, the supplier ecosystem is also trained to work as per the ecosystem, right? So yeah, yeah. So you would need to make sure that your commercials are also set up in that direction, and it's possible. I mean, it's trained behavior after a period of time, because when you're early as a marketplace, people's perception of you as a brand to offer credit is very different versus as you become a stronger brand and things like that. I mean, so I would say it's like a offline behavior and offline credit worthiness that you are trying to bring through a technology into the online world.
Like you would do some sort of KYC when you onboard a
Yeah,
customer
yeah,
to
absolutely.
decide
Yeah, yeah,
credit. Okay,
yeah.
okay, okay,
You'll have
okay.
to have those
All right.
means, because, yeah, the judicial system in the country is fairly broken. So,
Hmm, hmm, hmm.
it's pretty much you are on your own if you give credit to anyone.
Right, right. Okay. So, like, uh, y- uh, typically, do you in price are comparable to offline, or are you cheaper, or are you costlier? Because offline might have better um, cost structure, because they would not be so focused on the customer experience, and offline logistics is like a very old industry. So, are you like price wise comparable? Do people buy from Moglix for a better experience or for better price?
So we are able to offer price match and with better experience. I mean, that's our going in proposition, and then we are able to create total cost optimization, which is what we look at it as the way for the end customer when he's starting to look at the time he takes to discover a product, buy a product, getting the consistency of payment term, looking at ability to sort of optimize for his inventory levels and plant operation, things like that. Um, uh,
So, just help me understand this better. Like, what do you mean by helping them in the optimization? Like in terms of the timing of the delivery, like they can have predictable deliveries, or like what does this mean?
no, so we are able to, I mean, like the large enterprises today, we work with companies which are 10,000 CR turnover, so on and so forth. Many of them struggle with how do they plan inventory, how do they order process, how do they discover alternates for a product, things like that. So we are able to go very, very deep into many of these organizations and work with them on optimization at a very different level. And I think that's the beauty for us, that we are truly, in that sense, a partner for a manufacturing organization, which is very much powering uh, the entire procurement and supply chain, becoming efficient both on the total cost optimization basis as well as in terms of the customer experience we can deliver to them.
Mm-hmm. So you're like a procurement agency partner for them in a way, helping them find lower cost alternatives and.
And making sure you deliver end to end experience, because you're not just then again delegating the experience delivery to someone else. You are sort of owning the entire end to end experience being delivered to them.
And invoicing would also be simpler. Like
Correct.
for multiple products, they have this one entity who sends them an invoice, and the integration with their ERP. So, so this is for large enterprises. What about smaller companies? Like, are they an active segment for you, and how do you add value to them?
See, our value proposition fits across all customer segments, and I think many of them come online and buy from us using moglix.com, and we deliver to them, and we continue to sort of bring many of these SMEs online. Um, it's a it's a difficult problem to solve, the transformation for SMEs, and I think many consulting companies have struggled with that as well, because the effort it takes to transform the large organization might be the same as transforming a small organization. The ROI of that effort cannot be justified. So So we are doing various scalable things now because we think, and we are trying to touch as many MSMEs in the country. I think we need more and more scalable ways in which we can transform and get the benefits of working with Moglix out to every single MSME in the country.
What are some of the things you're doing to help MSMEs go digital?
I mean, some of the things we are doing on our end is definitely we are spending time and energy on education because education is a starting point. So we have now started to do, I would say, lot more outreach, even using the mainstream media. So we just launched our first kind of a video explanatory and how people can start to buy from us and use us to get their industrial products and things like that. So I think education, I believe, is one of the starting points because you have to create, we have to make them aware that they have better alternatives, and then we are able to enable them on coming online and creating an entire digital experience of buying and being able to manage all of their supplies even if they don't have ERP systems and things like that. So there are initiatives in that direction. Having said that, I think there is much more that can be done. It's just a and we have been sort of speaking to some of the government partners of what we can do more. um, Unfortunately, where India is, there are a lot of MSMEs, but firstly, their own appetite to go digital is low, and therefore it takes more time and effort to educate them. And second, I think there are no structural means in which you can do outreach to all of them and kind of drive a faster movement towards digital.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay. And typically, what is like the margin that you have, like a broad range, like is it like 10 to 20%, or like what does that look like?
So we don't have a public number for it, unfortunately, uh, and uh, I think it's still so much work in progress because we are pretty small piece of where the industry is, that we don't necessarily focus on it as much yet. I think the first objective is to kind of move the behavior um, towards getting a digital procurement systems and that buying behavior change.
Hmm. Okay. In terms of a geographical presence, what are the markets that you're strong in? Like, you know, uh, like say Faridabad is an industrial hub, and there would be a lot of such regional hubs. And so, where do you have like concentration of customers?
We are present now actually across pan India. We're present across north, south, east, west. We're present in more than 25 locations across the country. So um, we are starting to be the index of where is the manufacturing in the country. So I don't think there is any limitation per se from us now in terms of our geo reach or strength per se, uh, in terms of where we would be stronger or weaker or any of that dimension.
Hmm. Okay. Okay. So, how was the COVID and the lockdown experience for Moglix? Like, it would have shut down manufacturing to a large extent, and I imagine that would have hit you also quite a bit.
So I think COVID was an interesting sort of obviously unprecedented experience for all of us. And given we are a commerce company, we had our supply chain warehouses running all through the COVID. We were doing PP supplies. We were supplying to governments. We were supplying to many of the industries, so on and so forth. So I think it was a sort of a the first quarter, I would say, was pretty chaotic because manufacturing plants were shut down, or some of them were partially operating because our FMCG pharma customers were operating, and some of the process plants were operating, but then others were shut down. And you had this entire chaos between, I think, April to June, which was like learning by the day, and also while you're learning for the customers, but then your supply ecosystem, your own team members. So I think we're all kind of learning about it. But I think what has happened post COVID, I think, and I mean, technically we are not post COVID, but I think post the peak of COVID, uh, is that there is a strong movement from offline to online. We think it has probably gained 1 year short circuit of the shift in behavior for people, and I think that's fantastic for us as an organization.
Is that because people don't want to go out and meet vendors, so they prefer to order from home? Like,
I mean, that is one effect, but I think also it has also enabled them to challenge some of the stereotypes that did I really need to go out? Because many of those were habits. So it was not necessarily the requirement, it was more like a habit. So I think people have challenged themselves, and I think that has enabled them to start thinking that I don't need to actually go out, particularly if I'm working with an organized player and I know many of the things are being taken care of, right? So um, probably they would still hesitate to work with unorganized player if they have not met in person. But if they are working with a company like ours, it's far more easier to work with us and versus the smaller players in the ecosystem. So I think that's definitely one of the shift. It has happened probably across the entire gamut of e-commerce companies, not just for us.
have you bounced back? Like, there must have been a dip in your monthly run rate during the first quarter.
Yeah, so we bounced back quickly because I think for some reason, I think India pretty much by September, October, most of the manufacturing started to come at the 100% of at their level. So we were able to bounce back pretty quickly as an organization, and since then we have been on growth spree. So been growing rapidly as an organization.
Okay. So, what's going to be your focus for the next couple of years? Like, what do you want to invest heavily in to build either a capability or a technology or whatever? Like,
So we believe we are on a journey of building the de facto supply chain for B2B commerce industry in India, and also enabling cross-border transactions from India to the world. And I think that is where we are continuing to pursue it. And we recently launched our Middle East Center, so we are pretty bullish on expanding now in across the world, because we think the value proposition that we have built, the technology capabilities that we have built, is applicable in multiple parts of the world. So we will go pretty aggressive internationally also.
okay. So, this would be like the focus would be to help Indian suppliers to sell abroad, or to help like Indian companies to buy from abroad.
I mean, it's never a one-way street. I would say it's a combination of both, because if there are products which are not being uh, available in India and you need to buy from other countries and bring it to India, we would do that. But then, yes, we are definitely continuing to expand our horizon of selling Indian products in other parts of the world as well.
Does China have significant players in the transaction side? Like, Alibaba is again discovery only, right?
Alibaba is discovery. There are a couple of players who have become fairly large now in China as well. So there are two. Some of them started with us at the similar point in time, but given manufacturing is fairly large in China, they're now also they're now pretty large. So JD has a product, ZKH has products. Both of them are billion-dollar plus companies now in China.
Hmm, hmm, hmm. Okay, okay. And what is your plan to fund the growth? Are you eventually looking at an IPO, or like, what do you see as that journey?
So we think there is private capital and there is public markets. I think um, today still where we are, probably for next couple of years we would be best funded by private capital, um, and I think in the next 3 to 4 years is when it would make sense to kind of move towards public markets. Also, I think given we are building global company, I think you need to be above a certain size and scale before you can become a public company um, in many of the large stock exchanges.
So that was Rahul telling us the secret sauce behind the success of Moglix. And if you'd like to know more about Moglix, then check out moglix.com.
If you like the Founder Thesis podcast, then do check out our other shows on subjects like marketing, technology, career advice, books, and drama. Visit thepodium.in, that is thepodium.in, for a complete list of all our shows.